So if we actually look at physical activity in people, again, the pattern seems to be more mixed. So what I'm doing here now is going to be reporting some data from a company called Withings. If you don't know, they market smart devices. So they have Bluetooth scales that will interact with your smartphone. They have activity monitors and so on and so forth. And the advantage they've got is they can review big data on what is actually happening. So when they reported their data a little while ago, later on in the pandemic, they had noted that people were recording fewer steps during that pandemic. That was to an extent a bit country dependent. So USA, UK, fewer steps. Germany, in fact, actually increased steps there, interestingly. There was also less formal use of sports equipment, particularly gym facilities and tennis courts and so on and so forth, which again is perhaps not surprising given the restrictions that have been in place as a result of the pandemic. So potentially certain factors which could negatively impact on energy balance. But on the plus side, it appeared that people became more creative about activity. So they found more evidence of people hiking and more sessions such as yoga, particularly online sessions, which I think would chime with what I'm sure we all did in the early stage of the pandemic, taking Joe Wicks's PE classes online. And then a final trend that they noted, which I think is particularly interesting, was that they also noted people were sleeping more. And it's long been known that sleep patterns can impact on risk of obesity. So people that tend to sleep for shorter periods are more at risk of developing obesity. So I think a little bit like pets and what we saw in the PAW report, the physical activity changes are somewhat mixed. Now, I know what you're probably thinking at this particular point. This is all very interesting, but what actually about risk of obesity? And again, I want to look at people and pets in parallel. So people first, early on in the pandemic, there was, again, a lot of fear that those behavioral changes I've mentioned already would lead to weight gain. And again, there were a lot of fear reports coming out. And in fact, actually, in an early study, which was using self-reported weights, and this was the first stage of the pandemic where the lockdown was heaviest, and this is from the USA, it was suggested that people were gaining an average of just over 1/4 kilogram every 10 days. And if you're interested in social media, the hashtag quarantine15 was trending. And that was the feeling that people had gained on average 15 pounds as a result of those first few months of lockdown. However, this really comes back very much to what Chris Lawrence was saying right at the start, and the importance of analysing data and trends more precisely. I'm now going to be showing you some data from a very large data set. This is almost 20 million people, where weight records have been reported over time. And this is comparing change in weight in the year before the pandemic in green versus change in weight post-pandemic in orange. And if you can see here on the x-axis, this is pounds of change. So pluses here are gain in pounds and minuses here are loss of pounds. And you can actually see that in both sets of data, there's a wide range, some people gaining, some people losing, with most people on average just gaining a little bit, plus or minus 2.5 pounds, which is really sort of no significant change. Of course, there are some that gain significant amounts of weight. Likewise, there are some individuals that lose. But critically, from the pandemic point of view, there's not a clear difference in trend. So it would appear that weight change is kind of similar during the pandemic and after the pandemic compared with before. And so it really does, again, reflect the need for us to look at trends. Data from the same source, this now almost 50 million records where people have had their weight recorded over time from 2017 onwards. What you can actually see each year is that there is kind of a cyclical trend of weight gain. So early in the year, there's a gain and it's lost later. Over time, however, there has been a gradual trend for increasing weight, about £1 pound per year on average. The critical thing from the pandemic point of view is actually that whilst there has been a continued increase from pandemic, it's no different from the trends that were seen before. So the average gain during the pandemic was about £1, and that was exactly the same as what was seen pre-pandemic. So I think the reality is the jury is out as to whether these behavioral changes that we're seeing in terms of food activities and physical activity are actually manifesting in any changes in weight.